So I mentioned earlier that I had a resource page that has where if you were to do podcasting as your project, then I would send you there and it would tell you a little bit about how to do it as a project. It's useful as a page for you just in case you want to learn about podcasting a little bit more. So this is from that page. I'm just going to walk you through a few things that I've got on this page and talking about how if you were to do a podcast assignment, which you're not required to, then here's kind of what you would need to do and where you could find some resources to teach you about it. But here's where I have a few ideas on different kinds of podcasts that you could possibly do, because I think there's a lot of options for podcasting in education. And perhaps not all of these would be useful for you, but maybe some of them would. Excuse me. So for example, if you were into literature or maybe even history, someplace where you would use books, you could do things like book talks, which are basically like a book club where you read a book and then you sit around and you talk about the book and you record that conversation and you have prepared material to talk about with that book. Now that may sound kind of boring, but during its heyday, one of the most popular podcasts on iTunes was MuggleCast. Actually, I think it was called Pottercast is what it was called. And it was basically a podcast about the Harry Potter series, where they just sat around and talked about the book and about the symbolisms and the different things that they saw in the book and had some fun with the characters and different things like that. So at that time, that was really popular, and so that could be done. You could do things like literature circles, which are very similar. You can click on the link to learn more about that. You can act out things. Back in the day, radio dramas were very popular. War of the Worlds, um, things like that. And it'd be fun to have students interpret a piece of literature by acting out by acting it out and dramatizing it, and then making a podcast version of that. It could be very fun. You could do something like a Meet the Author, where maybe students set up interviews with either real authors, which I think would be fabulous, for them to interview local authors here in Utah, for example, and talk to them about literary concepts. Or you could even do like a fake Meet the Author or Meet the historical figure, where maybe someone pretends to be Shakespeare and their assignment is to learn everything about Shakespeare so that they can, in an interview, act as if they were Shakespeare. And then the students interview each other and post those interviews up, and they can be an informative way of learning about a character by acting out that person in an interview. There can be things like science logs for in science classes. If people are doing science experiments and they're logging their daily progress on that science experiment. Art critiques, where they're going around critiquing pieces of art and creating maybe a podcast that you could take with you to accompany you if you went to a museum. The BYU Museum of Art has done these kinds of things where they'll have things that you can listen to and listen to them as you're going through the exhibit. And I think it'd be fabulous for example, for students to do something similar, give them a greater appreciation for art and create something that could maybe be of useful to people in the community, would represent research that they've done on those pieces of art and different things like that. Historical audio diaries, oral histories, where they go around and interview people who are passing on, who have great wisdom about World War II, those vets that we're losing so soon and they're dying off, and that's just one example, but lots of people have wonderful experiences. You could go and do oral histories and learn a lot about history that way as well. Interview with an expert related to any topic, where they could go and just interview experts in the community on different subjects. Debates, where you could have two people prepare, or two sides prepare material on a debate and then actually have that debate and record it. And then you could also do things where they imitate really famous podcasts but do it in their own way about their subjects, the things that you're teaching in your classes. So for example, a really popular podcast is Stuff You Should Know, which is from the HowStuffWorks.com people, where they have articles on interesting things on the How Stuff Works website, and then they talk about this stuff for a 15-minute podcast and teach this topic and encourage people to go to the website to learn more. Well, you could easily have students report about stuff that they feel people should know, that they've learned about in their subject area. Another fun way to do a similar kind of thing is the 60-second psych. I actually think it's been changed now to be called the 60-second mind podcast. 60 seconds to report on a research study. So you have to be very concise. You have to really know what you're talking about to be able to say it in 60 seconds. If you don't know what you're talking about, you'll take longer than that, that's for sure. So it's a way for students to very briefly represent what they learn by being very concise in showing something that they've learned about a specific topic. 60 seconds on a topic, I think is kind of fun. There's a lot of application for language lessons where there's a lot of language podcasts out there that could be imitated, well, used for one thing and consumed as a way of learning a language, but then students could produce things like that as well to represent what they can speak in a certain language. Quick and dirty tips. If you're an English major, you should know about the Quick and Dirty Tips Grammar Girl website. But there are other Quick and Dirty Tips podcasts as well. Grammar Girl is just one of them, but it's a fabulous podcast for making grammar fun. It's actually pretty fun to learn about grammar when you listen to Grammar Girl. And I could see you either assigning that to students to learn about grammar, or reporting what they've learned by listening to some of these podcasts and maybe splitting them up so different people listen to different ones and then report back what they've learned, or have them record their own and try to imitate Grammar Girl and learn about a grammar concept and then teach about it in a similar style. So lots of different ways that you could, I think, use podcasts in education, and I'm interested in any other ideas that you have as content experts in your own field. And I would recommend that if you were to do a podcast, a similar kind of thing where you create a storyboard first so that you know exactly what you're going to say, because there's nothing worse than a rambling podcast. Then go and record your podcast using something like GarageBand, Audacity, or something else, and then you have to find a way to host that MP3 file online. And there's different ways that you can do that, and I've got some tips, including how to do it in something like a Google Sites. And there's another way that you can do it that's pretty easy using something like AudioBoo, and I'll post that link down below. So there's some possibilities. I hope you'll consider podcasting as maybe one of your multimedia options.